3 days after my startup went bankrupt, I decided to end my life. To avoid causing a scene, I thoughtfully chose a deserted cliff and planned to jump into the sea, hoping to leave quietly without anyone remembering me as a failure. Not only had my business failed, but my boyfriend had also cheated on me with my once best friend. I cleared all traces of my presence, even the browser history, and was ready to leap from the cliff. Just then, a voice nearby said, "Even in death, there should be some order. I was here first. If you want to die, you need to wait your turn." This was the first time I'd ever heard that one might have to queue up to die. It made the king of hell seem lenient by comparison. I turned around, grabbed a handful of mud, and threw it towards the source of the voice. Why not go a bit mad before I die? After living a life of obedience, little did I know, this would be how I first met Frank. He stepped out from behind a rock, discarded his cigarette but clumsily, and stomped it out. "Miss, you can't die here." I was furious. "Why not? Is your name written here?" Frank, choked by smoke, coughed several times before seriously telling me, "No, it's just that I plan to die here." I almost apologized out of reflex, but then I pushed the thought away. Why should I be afraid of him if I too came here to die? So, I simply sat down on the ground. I can't outcompete others in business, but should I also lose out in dying? Either you go first, or I do. If not, we could even jump together, hand in hand. Frank gave me a long look and seemed troubled. "That wouldn't be right," I scoffed. "What, afraid of being the subject of gossip even in death?" Frank shook his head. "No, it's not that. I'm just not comfortable dying with someone else," as if he had died many times before. "How about this?" Frank suggested. "There's a lower cliff over there. Why don't you jump from there?" That was out of the question. I shook my head. It's too easy to be found there, and too messy. More importantly, I feared that after making the effort to get there, I might change my mind about dying. "But you could go there," I sincerely suggested to him, "and in return, I could symbolically call an ambulance for you." It sounded useless, lacked competitive edge, and certainly didn't pinpoint the user's pain point, so I added a bit sheepishly, "Or even the crematorium." Frank's pale face cracked a wry smile. Then he sat down beside me, looking towards the distant blue sky and white clouds. He sighed and replied, "No, the reason I want to die here is to ensure no one can find me. My family." That was a problem. In a competition between similar products, I could never find a compelling reason why mine would be the chosen one. That was my weakness. In life as well. I shrugged helplessly, resigned as I had been all my life. Just as I was about to get up, Frank unexpectedly grabbed me. This would be offensive to a normal person, but just right for someone about to die. He looked up at me, trying his best to smile. "May I ask why you want to die?" It's a long story, though it sounds cliché and mundane. It's just a story about a naive girl with entrepreneurial dreams who ultimately runs her company into the ground. On the day the business collapses, she comes home only to find her best friend and boyfriend together in bed, completely oblivious to the world around them. It's just like the saying my mom used to repeat, "Mia, your dad and I are ordinary folks. Do you really expect to mutate your genes and achieve something extraordinary? You might as well admit you're worthless and just come back home to get married and have kids." That's how our generation did it. Why bother struggling? Thanks to my mom's blessings, her wish has come true. I indeed became the failure she always wanted to see, both in love and in business. I didn't want to expose such a pathetic version of myself to everyone. Dying seemed like the best option. After all, the world never has much sympathy for the failures, nor does it remember them. So, I clapped my hands and said rather proudly to Frank, "What do you think? Don't I need this place more? But since you genuinely need it here, I don't mind stepping back one last time, a final act of kindness before I die. I'll let you have it." After saying that, I turned to leave with feigned nonchalance. Unexpectedly, at that moment, Frank spoke up. "Hey, if you succeed in your business, would you let me have this place and not go through with dying?" I stopped in my tracks, suddenly feeling a lump in my throat. Success, who wouldn't want that? But isn't that just an unattainable dream? Yet, I turned around and gave Frank a teary smile. "Yes." Frank looked at me seriously for a moment and then suddenly broke into a smile. "Good, it's a deal." He stood up, dusted off his clothes, dropped his phone, and walked towards me, responding to my proposition. On the phone Frank left behind, There was a message he hadn't seen from his mother: "Why don't you just die?" In order to secure that cliff spot where one could jump to an unidentifiable death, Frank decided to help me start a business. When I wanted to die unknown, I deliberately left my ID at home. But when Frank and I went back, we encountered Chandler playing video games at home. He was my ex-boyfriend who had betrayed me. During a break in his game, he glanced at me and then at Frank behind me, scoffing, "Mia, I hear you're looking to die. Don't tell me you think this will make me look at you more. Or did you think getting a guy would make me change my mind and get back together with you?" Mia's former best friend Bella, wearing a lacy camisole, also chimed in to support Chandler. "I know Chandler is great, but Mia, you can't just cling to him like this, damn it." Ironically, that made me laugh. Just as I was about to turn and leave, angered, I suddenly remembered something. "Wait, isn't this house mine?" Never mind, considering I'm someone who prefers peace, I decided to turn around, go into my room, and start packing. For the first time, I realized that after living in a house for so many years, the only things you can take with you are what fits in a small suitcase. After packing my bag, I threw it outside the door, turned to Chandler and said, "Get out." Then to Bella, "You too." With no ID and having discarded his phone, Frank could only temporarily stay at my place. The desire to die subsiding, I even started to feel hungry. Frank didn't react much. He just sat on the couch, curiously scanning the room's furnishings. I realized the reality of my empty pockets. Ordering takeout was no longer an option, and the kitchen was just as barren. After some rummaging, I unearthed 2 cups of instant noodles, stocked by Chandler for convenient snacking during gaming sessions. One was hot pepper flavored, the other pickled vegetable. I boiled some water, quickly prepared them, and brought one to Frank. He looked surprised and hesitated before finally picking up a bowl. Instant noodles are only deemed a delicacy when one is extremely hungry. I slurped mine eagerly while Frank dry swallowed beside me. Thinking he was just shy, I urged him to help himself. He glanced at me, then with a resolved expression, he ferociously forked a mouthful. He barely had a few bites before covering his mouth and rushing to the bathroom, violently throwing up. I was shocked and rushed to the door, knocking and asking, "Are you okay? I'm so sorry. I didn't know you couldn't eat this." Frank opened the door, his eyes red and shimmering with tears, yet he managed a very gentle smile and said calmly, "It's okay, it's not your fault, just stomach cancer." His casual remark nearly floored me. Then I understood. "Is this why you tried to kill yourself?" I asked. Frank nonchalantly replied, "Something like that." He then returned to the dining table, intending to continue eating the noodles. I snatched them from his hands, insisting, "No. You can't eat this anymore." He held on to the bowl, saying, "It's okay, this little won't make a difference." How could I let him? I gave him no choice, took the noodles, and flushed them down the toilet. He didn't argue, just quietly watched me, his eyes reflecting a burnt-out desperation. I went back to the kitchen and after some searching, I found a pack of dry noodles I had stashed while busy designing products. Knowing Chandler would never touch them, surprisingly, they came in handy. From the nearly empty fridge, I pulled out the last egg, a tomato, and a nearly empty bottle of sesame oil. I made Frank a simple but hearty tomato and egg noodle soup. Concerned about his stomach, I cooked the noodles very soft and drizzled some sesame oil to stimulate his appetite. The dish was so fragrant and warm, even I found myself salivating. As I served it, I sheepishly kept most of it for myself. "This is all we have left at home, make do with it. I'll borrow some money from a friend later, and we can buy some groceries. We've got to live well before we die. I'll cook something light for your stomach. You have to eat something." Frank looked up at me, his eyes seemingly clouded with a mist. I thought convincing such a stubborn man would be tough, but before I could finish, he took the bowl of noodles and started eating vigorously yet with difficulty. It was clear he struggled with nausea several times but somehow managed to keep it down. My cooking skills are quite decent. I think it's just that the noodles weren't to his taste, so I quickly tried to persuade him, "If it doesn't suit your taste, don't force yourself." He wouldn't listen. He continued to force the noodles into his mouth while suppressing the urge to vomit. "No, it's really good. I'll finish it." I was a bit annoyed. Why put yourself through this?" In the mist rising from the noodles, I saw Frank lift his head. There was a shimmer in his eyes, gathering in his sockets. The moment they fell, they shattered just like him in front of me, because it tastes like home. Frank finished eating. After he had finished, he looked at me seriously. Mia, could you bring a bowl of these noodles to my grave every year? I couldn't help but twitch the corner of my mouth and retorted, please. By then you'll be gone without a trace. Where am I supposed to find your grave? Frank looked down in thought for a moment before speaking to me seriously. Even taking it to that cliff is an option. I could see it in his eyes. He truly wished to end his life. Don't worry, I'll pay this fee up front. It won't be part of the original deal I made with you. After he finished speaking, he walked over to the table, pulled out a sheet of paper, and wrote down a series of numbers. Buy this stock and sell it after 3 months. Holding the paper, I gave a bitter smile. Big brother, I've been declared bankrupt. I'm struggling even to afford meals. Where would I get the money to invest in stocks? Frank looked around the room with an undeniable firmness in his tone. Then mortgage this house and sell it, whatever it takes, just gather the money. His conviction was so strong that even I began to waver. I stared at the numbers. I had already faced death once. What's there to lose in taking one more gamble? At worst, I'd be left with nothing, no delusions of rising again. One leap from the high cliff to the low slope would end it all. Nobody cares whether I live or die anyway, might as well consider it as earning a few more months to live. So, I made up my mind, all right, let's do it, I'll trust you this time. Because the house was well located, I quickly found a real estate agent and sold it at a good price. After setting aside a portion of the sale proceeds for rent and daily expenses, I invested the rest in ST Group stock as Frank had instructed. In the days following the purchase, I watched the stock's value fluctuate, agonizing over every dip and rejoicing at every rise. When Frank saw this, he coldly advised me to turn off my phone. Forget about it, pretend this stock never existed, it's not your money on the line. I almost jumped off the sofa in frustration. Frank, busy packing, didn't even look up. Trust me, no one knows this stock better than I do. He paused briefly. I'm not in the habit of dragging others down with me before I die, you can be sure of that. Seeing that I remained silent, he turned to look at me, smiling gently. The tomato noodles are really tasty. I'd like to have them every year on the anniversary. I wrinkled my nose and hummed noncommittally, still packing, when there was a knock at the door. Chandler's banging echoed from outside. Mia, come out here. Who the hell gave you the right to sell this house? Where am I supposed to live now? Frank straightened up, but I stopped him and opened the door. Get it straight, Chandler, my name is on this house. Whether I sell it, rent it, or demolish it, that's my business. Who are you to meddle? Chandler's face turned beet red. I don't care, I've lived here, and that makes it my house. If you want me out, cough up 10 million as a breakup fee, or I'm not leaving. He tried to push his way in, but stopped when he saw Frank approaching. Then, with a smug smile, he taunted, I get it, Mia, you want to kick me out for this guy. Huh, fine, if you don't pay me today, I'll spill all your dirty laundry right here in this complex. You won't have an easy time. I couldn't help but laugh in anger. Let's get this straight, Chandler, you've been spending my money all these years. Also, I've been completely transparent with Mr. Frank. If you dare spread rumors and tarnish my reputation, I'll make sure the whole world knows about your 3-second knockout. Chandler fumed, raising his hand to strike. You lowlife. With a loud thump, he fell backward as Frank delivered a swift kick to his chest. Leaning against the doorframe, Frank adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and chuckled. What, did you fall? Try to keep your balance. Chandler tried to get up to fight back, but seeing Frank, who was a head taller, his courage faltered. Yet unwilling to let it go, he jumped up and yelled, Are you sick or something? Frank didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and said, Yes, how did you know? Pointing to his head, he grinned more softly. Right here, really sick, mentally ill, killing you wouldn't be a crime. Chandler was left speechless, his curse words chewed over in his mouth without daring to spit them out. After muttering, crazy, he scrambled away. Watching Chandler's embarrassing retreat, Frank scoffed, useless, turning away. His gloomy demeanor instantly lifted, reverting to his usual smiling self, even with a hint of pride. All right, he's gone, we can move now. His words had scared not just Chandler, but even me a bit, so I cautiously pointed to my own head and asked him, Do you really have? Frank paused, then with a smile asked me, Are you scared? Hesitantly, I admitted, scared, but I'm more afraid of failing. Frank burst into hearty laughter. Then that settles it. With Frank's help, packing went quickly. Looking back at the empty house, I couldn't help feeling emotional. This was the first big purchase I made when I earned my initial fortune, thinking it would be a place to bring my parents to acknowledge my achievements and abilities, where we could live happily and harmoniously. But back then, I didn't realize that a house is just a house. It doesn't necessarily make a home. Holding back tears, I turned to Frank and said, "Let's go." He moved slowly, and just before we left, he stopped me. "Mia, it will all pass." I turned back to him, tears rolling down my face. With tears in my eyes, I forced a smile. "It's no big deal, just a house. I'll have others. You can't go back on your word, right?" He paused for a moment, then smiled. "Of course." Then he bent down, took my hand, and took the heavy suitcase from me. Striding towards the elevator, "We'll have it all, not just a house." During those months waiting for the stocks to surge, I started setting up a new company. Frank and I huddled in a rented apartment, designing products for the new company. Frank learned to cook, although as clumsy as his smoking habits, it was decent enough. Besides, when busy, as long as there's something to fill the stomach, who cares about the taste? I once asked Frank, just what kind of person? Why does he look so much like a pampered young master who hasn't done a day's work in his life? Frank always responds with just a smile. "I can't tell you. If I do, you'll remember me forever after I'm gone." "I don't want to be remembered." I frowned and scoffed down the meal Frank had prepared. Then I said, "All right, but you are not allowed to die before I make it." I put down my bowl and chopsticks and went back to my computer to continue working. Frank sat there, looking at his barely touched food, and chuckled softly. "Mia, what does success look like in your eyes?" I pretended to be deaf and didn't answer his question. He picked up his bowl and tried to eat something, but after a few bites, he had to rush to the bathroom. His refusal to eat was severe. Every time I suggested going to the hospital, he would pretend to be deaf just like I had. While he was suffering in the bathroom, I took a short break from work and went to the kitchen to make him a bowl of tomato and egg noodles. The steaming noodles sat on the table as I focused on my work at the computer desk, casually saying, "You have to eat. If your stomach is upset, you need something gentle. I don't know what's with this noodle dish. It clumps up if it sits too long. Better eat it quickly." I heard a soft chuckle nearby but didn't dare to look back. Only the sound of bowl and chopsticks touching lightly resonated slowly. I knew that was the only thing Frank could eat. The day the prototype was completed, Frank and I had our first argument. I slammed the table and confronted him. "Frank, are you questioning my expertise in this field?" Frank, unusually stern, retorted, "I may not be as skilled in design as you are, but I understand the user's needs better than you do." "Mia, you're not just creating for yourself or your peers. You need to aim at the market, at the users. Who are you targeting? Who should your product precisely cater to? Have you thought about these things before designing?" I was speechless. All I knew was to push towards greater professionalism in my designs. It had always been that way. I firmly believed that ultimate professionalism could touch people's hearts. It indeed impressed a group of people and became the foundational capital for my company to emerge. But when I tried to expand further, I suddenly realized that I couldn't step forward. Not only could I not move forward, but I was also hindered by my past successes, unable to advance. "Mia, no matter what, high-end products need substantial capital support. Do you have it? Get out. Without these, rashly entering the high-end market is a dead end. Get lost." "Mia." Frank was utterly frustrated, his face red with anger, yet, with the most brutal words, he shattered my pride bit by bit. "Your products can't even survive. What can you use to let more people know about them? Even make users who are accustomed to the market abandon their familiarity for your choice?" I clenched my teeth, tears uncontrollably streaming down. "Leave, just leave." Frank fell silent. He looked at me deeply, then laid all the design drafts on the table and left without a backward glance. The door slammed shut. I could barely stand, leaning against the door as I slid down, covering my face and sobbing. Frank was not just denying my product, he was denying the proud me I used to be. The suppressed pain surged crazily at that moment, overwhelming me, alone in the rental. I let out a desperate and angry roar. I knew Frank was right, but I couldn't lower my pride. In the rental, I indulged in screaming out all my grievances until my energy was completely drained, and my anger subsided. I had to admit, reluctantly, Frank was right. A product disconnected from its users is doomed to be eliminated by the market. Products that cannot capture a larger market will ultimately fail in their infancy. The issue of not being able to target accurately had always been my downfall, nearly leading to my demise, until I met Frank, until he reached out to me, sparking my realization. I looked around for him, only then remembering I had driven him away. Without his phone or ID, he had nowhere to go, he had no will to live. I was scared. For the first time, I was terrified of Frank leaving my world, purely out of selfishness. If he died, I might really. I picked up my phone from the table and swung the door open. Just as I was about to step out, a figure stumbled back. Ouch! The once gentle and elegant man fell sprawling to the ground. After catching his breath and seeing it was me, he couldn't help but complain. Could you say something when you opened the door? In that moment, I cried tears of joy. You didn't leave, he countered. Where would I go? Did you want me to leave? Should I leave now? I hurriedly asked. So you've been here the whole time? Frank gave me a stern look. What else? It was unexpected. A sense of guilty pleasure rose in my heart, but then I suddenly remembered something else. So, what I was doing inside just now, going crazy. Frank nodded indifferently. Don't worry. I heard everything. I heard it all. He tried to stand up, supporting his sore back, and I helped him up, feeling my cheeks burning hot. So Frank sat back down. It's been tough, but everything's going to be fine. I'll help you. No, that's not what I mean. What then? I mean, the things you just heard. Oh, that, don't worry. I have a good memory. I can definitely remember it clearly. Maybe I'll recite it back to you later. Frank is sick, seriously sick. I'm sure of it. I've asked him several times over those days to forget what happened that day, but he always shook his head. No, I go over it every day, afraid that I'll forget. I got frustrated. Are you out of your mind? Why do you even remember that stuff? He nonchalantly continued slicing tomatoes. Just in case, when I die, I won't have anything to hold over you. You forgot to bring me tomato and egg noodles. He handed me the plate of sliced tomatoes. Annoyed, I pushed him away from the stove. Look at you, how can you never get tired of that? He laughed softly, a laugh as light as a feather, touching the most tender part of my heart. Delicious, not tired of it. His gaze fell on me. I sped up the process of beating the eggs, trying to use the noise to cover up any feelings that shouldn't be there. Eventually, the sound of beating eggs stopped. That's when Frank spoke. Mia, consider it a loan from you. For what? I want to buy a mobile phone. The stocks were about to sell. They had soared recently. I thought about selling multiple times, but Frank stopped me. He said, wait, after all, you earned this money for me. I poured the egg mixture into the pan somewhat grumpily. But why do you want a mobile phone? You never wanted one before. Are you planning to leave? Frank didn't answer. He took the hot noodles to the table and handed me the bowl and chopsticks. On the table, there was already a feast prepared by him. Frank's silence didn't hide his intentions for long. After getting the phone, I finally understood what he wanted to do. He wasn't planning to leave. He just wanted to take pictures, specifically, to take pictures of me. The huge phone had no apps. Not even a SIM card, just photos of me, sitting, lying, standing, all sorts of poses, each one looking great. I asked him what this was all about. He smoothly pulled the phone from my hands, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and gently patted it. Taking it with me, so I won't forget you, so I can find you when I want noodles. I glared at him, childish. He didn't care. He just sat down with me, seriously discussing how to refine our products according to the market. Under Frank's guidance, I kept tweaking and adjusting the product, gradually perfecting it. I planned to test the market, so I reached out to a client with whom I had previously collaborated. He was also an old friend. My plan was to get his help to distribute my products through his channels, and then we would share the profits. He would take the larger share, and I would take the smaller one. However, after reviewing my product, he scoffed dismissively. The product is good, but we don't need it. I was infuriated and asked him why. He tossed my design aside, and with a sly squint, he gave me a once-over. We receive numerous designs daily. There's no need to specifically use yours, but Miss Mia, you haven't completely lost your chance. I've had my eye on you for a long time, Miss Mia. If you're willing to spend a night with me, I guarantee we can still be the closest of partners. Your company could revive from near death through a collaboration with us." As he spoke, his hand began to wander around my waist, stealthily moving towards inappropriate places. Rage boiled over in me instantly, unable to contain my anger. I slapped him across the face and called him a beast. He looked at me in shock. Only after I snatched all my designs back did he react, yelling for security to throw me out. "Mia, you ungrateful wretch. Who do you think you are? I will blacklist you, and your company will never make it in this industry again." I left quickly, ignoring his loud curses. It wasn't until I returned to my rental room that I realized what I had done. The client I had slapped was a leading figure in the industry. Now, I had hit him. All my efforts seemed doomed in that impulsive moment, and regret washed over me. I leaned against the door, feeling helpless. Frank came over, looking somewhat comical in an apron and holding a spatula. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. The moment he spoke, all my grievances burst forth, and I collapsed, sobbing. "It's all over, Frank. I've ruined everything." I cried loudly and helplessly until a warm embrace enveloped me. Offering a brief respite, I sobbed uncontrollably on his shoulder. Unearthing all my grievances for the world to see, this was the last harassment, but not the first. The first time, I had fled in panic and called my mother from a corner, sobbing about my ordeal. Her indifferent response was, "You're too sensitive. Doesn't everyone go through this? It's your own fault for giving him the chance. Why would he harass you if you didn't invite it? I told you not to dress provocatively. You've shamed our family. How can I even consider marrying you off?" I hung up the phone feeling adrift, like duckweed floating aimlessly in a foreign land, longing for a rock to rest on. Yet, it seemed I was caught in a whirlpool, helpless and out of control. It was in that moment that years of suppressed grievances erupted over a seemingly trivial matter. It wasn't just about losing an opportunity, it was about the pain I had endured silently for so long. I don't remember how long I cried. Frank kept the same posture throughout, patting my back and whispering words of comfort until I was utterly exhausted. Only then did I manage to pull myself from his embrace and wipe away my tears. "It's not a big deal. I just didn't think it through. It's okay. I'll ask him again. It's just one night, after all." As I stood up to leave, Frank suddenly stood up too, his anger uncontrollable, a stark contrast to our usual arguments. I could feel his real anger. An unprecedented oppressive force that made me involuntarily stop in my tracks. "What exactly happened? Tell me," he demanded, his tone leaving no room for question. I bit my lip, silent. Frank grew even angrier. "Mia, what in the world could possibly be more important than your feelings, to even keep such a grievance to yourself? If you trust me, tell me," he emphasized again. Looking up, I couldn't see his expression behind the reflective lenses, but his firm demeanor seemed to inspire courage in me. "Mia, you can feel anything with me. I will always stand by you. Tell me, Mia, tell me." His last words seemed to carry a strange plea. Finally, I gathered the courage. Cautiously and with immense regret, I shared everything with Frank. He listened intently, so much so that I didn't even notice that throughout it all, his fists were clenched, his brows furrowed, his teeth gritted. After I finished, he exploded with rage, slamming the table and pulling out his phone to dial a number, only to realize there was no SIM card. Furious, Frank threw his phone aside and then knelt down to gently wipe the tears from my face. "Mia, it's okay. Listen, you focus on running the company, improve the product, and don't let such scoundrels affect your mood. Leave the rest to me. I'll handle it and get you a satisfactory response." I wanted to ask him what he was planning to do, but he didn't answer. Instead, Frank gave me a new suggestion. If this so-called market leader wanted to block us domestically, then we should completely abandon the domestic market and go international. With his limited capabilities, can he really reach beyond our borders? Frank said contemptuously, exhaling a puff of smoke. Before he could finish, he began coughing violently, turning red in the face and neck. I gently patted his back to help him catch his breath. I can never understand why someone who obviously doesn't smoke insists on trying it just because others do. Jumping off a cliff is too painful. I heard slow suicide hurts less. Might as well do some things I've never dared to do before. Don't ask, because if you do, it just means I'm being rebellious. I was so annoyed that I pushed him away. "Disgusting," he said, turning to look at me. "Don't like it. Who likes the smell of smoke?" Before I could finish speaking, he decisively stubbed out the cigarette and threw the rest into the trash can so quickly that I almost didn't catch it. Seeing my shocked and puzzled look, Frank seemed indifferent. I just wanted to try something that's never allowed at home. Since you don't like it, there's no need to keep trying. He dusted off the ash from his clothes and stood up to leave. I'm going out to take care of some things. Wait for me to come back. Frank returned home late at night with several thick file folders in his hand. I asked him where he had been, and he casually showed me his ID, went to get some documents. He then naturally ignored the subject of the file folders. Late at night, Frank and I each sat at our desks under a small lamp. I was busy with company matters while he was engrossed in the contents of the file folders. Every now and then, I couldn't help but steal glances at him. He read very intently, occasionally taking notes. Sometimes, though, his hands would tremble noticeably, and it took him a while to steady himself before he could continue writing, but it seemed not to bother him much. However, I didn't like to see him always furrowing his brows, so I tiptoed over and gently patted his shoulder. He looked up blankly, and I made a sound and motioned with my mouth. He understood and mimicked me by opening his mouth, and I took the opportunity to pop a lollipop into it. He was slightly stunned, and I smiled at him. Have something sweet, it'll make you feel better. Then I patted his fluffy head, taking advantage of the moment. Before returning to my seat, I must say, Frank's hair felt really nice. I thought this happily as I prepared to joyfully continue my work. I felt a burning gaze on me, but when I looked up, I saw Frank seriously reviewing the documents with the lollipop I gave him in his mouth. Everything seemed so peaceful and normal. Following Frank's advice, I decided to target the overseas market. After thoroughly analyzing the culture and needs of overseas users and discussing in depth with Frank, I made meticulous modifications to our product. The results were very good. On the day of launch, we achieved impressive results. At the same time, Frank brought me some good news. The person who had been harassing me, his company had exploded with a massive scandal involving tax evasion, financial fraud, and misappropriation of funds, among other things. Almost simultaneously, his company made headlines everywhere. His biggest partner, ST Group, was the first to terminate all contracts with him and initiated legal proceedings for a substantial breach of contract compensation. As the saying goes, when the wall falls, everyone pushes. ST Group, like a weather vane, led all the partners to sever ties and file lawsuits one after another. Overnight, the high-rise crumbled. I watched the news excitedly, curiously asking Frank, "Did you do this?" He raised an eyebrow, neither confirming nor denying. In contrast, my business thrived as it captured the overseas market. Instead of floundering, the business began to thrive. During that period, I was incredibly busy, barely having time to touch the ground. The company was finally operational, with increasing orders. I had to start hiring and moved our office from a rented house to a proper office building. I was completely engrossed in various operational and maintenance tasks, barely able to step away. As a rising star, it was easy to attract favorable attention. In our newly arranged meeting room, I faced negotiations with potential investors, a situation my previous company had never achieved, leaving me momentarily overwhelmed and unsure of how to proceed. "Don't be afraid," Frank advised as we sat at home. He methodically outlined the key points and analyzed. "You had to reach this stage eventually. There are more financing rounds and roadshows ahead of you." Hearing this, my legs involuntarily trembled. I've always been someone who avoids interacting with people, preferring to bury myself in research and development rather than socialize, which was partly why my last venture failed. "Mia, you have to do this." I shivered, "but I'm afraid of making a mistake." What if? There are no what ifs," Frank reassured me, gripping my hand as if to transfer his strength. "I'm here with you. I promise there won't be any what ifs. I'll guide you through all the important points of negotiation and roadshows, the pitfalls to avoid, and strategies against every competitor. We can even rehearse until you no longer fear, until you can treat all the investors like you're talking to me. Mia, I'm with you, don't be afraid." His words, endlessly encouraging, seemed to carry a magical power that inexplicably soothed and compelled trust. Eventually, I mustered the courage. Holding a PPT, I stood in the living room and repeatedly practiced under Frank's guidance, incorporating various gestures into our conversations. He sat on the sofa, legs crossed, holding documents, occasionally adjusting his glasses, listening intently, and diligently pointing out my mistakes. He coached me on how to handle different competitors, and for a moment, I mistook him for a business mogul. I never delved deep into his past, but I could sense that those experiences were a source of profound distress for him. Curiosity about life isn't always necessary. It's enough to live together and leave past pains behind. The rest doesn't matter. Entrepreneurship is a process of continuously distilling one's passion and tears until a tiny, precious result is achieved after long hardships. I'm fortunate to have someone like Frank to walk this thorny path with me. As Frank tapped the documents in his hand, he asked, "Why are you staring off into space?" I smiled, feeling a surge of courage. "Nothing, let's continue." Thanks to Frank's challenging approach during rehearsals, I was highly successful when dealing with investors and roadshows. I secured several deals and investments, propelling the company to rapid success. However, as the saying goes, the leading goose gets shot. Our rise attracted significant competition. I found myself constantly embroiled in business battles. Fortunately, Frank was there as my advisor, helping me strategize. As the company's situation improved, I could no longer stay confined to one city. Constantly negotiating and inspecting airplanes and hotels became my home. I always wanted Frank to join me, but he preferred to stay behind the scenes, in the same old rental we started from. Assisting me remotely, I managed to get him a mobile phone and, after much persuasion, set up a new WeChat account for him, trying to bring him into the limelight of our success. He half listened. The good news is, he finally started using WeChat again, opening a new channel for external communication. The bad news is, I was his only contact. I called him daily, sharing updates and seeking his advice, discussing the best decisions. Sometimes I couldn't help but imagine Frank in a three-piece suit, relaxed on a sofa, reviewing financial statements and lightly tapping on documents. It seemed like a scene from memory, not much different. "Mia, are you listening?" I snapped back to reality, quickly replying, "Yes, I'm listening." From the other end, Frank responded. I then remembered something else. "Frank, have you been eating well at home?" He hesitated before giving a guilty, I was a bit upset but couldn't help coaxing him. "Please take care of yourself at home." "Okay, when I return, I'll make you tomato and egg noodles." "All right." Perhaps my coaxing skills weren't great, but Frank chuckled lightly. "Okay." Since he was agreeable today, I pushed further. "Frank, let's go to the hospital when I get back." "Are you sick?" His voice became anxious. "What's wrong? Do you need me to pick you up?" I quickly denied it. No, no, no. I have money now. I want to take you for a checkup. With today's advanced technology, your illness shouldn't be a big problem. Maybe it's not as bad as we think." "Okay," I asked nervously, very cautiously, after a long silence, so long I almost thought the call had dropped. A very faint "okay" came through, trembling at the end. At that moment, I hadn't even considered that one day Frank might almost not wait for me. After finishing my schedule, I got off the plane and while waiting, I called Frank to talk about the trip. He listened intently, unusually without any comments. Something felt off. I quickly asked him, "Frank, what's wrong with you?" The response was a coarse, uncontrollable panting. Panic set in. "Frank, Frank." I called out his name as I dashed out of the airport like a madwoman and flagged down a taxi. I urged the driver to speed, listening to his intermittent gasps over the phone, feeling as though my heart was being squeezed. "Just wait for me, Frank, wait for me," I said, frightening the driver into panic as well. He floored the accelerator. Speeding down the highway, Frank didn't respond. His breathing turned to groans. "Mia, be careful on the road." He couldn't even finish his sentence before I heard a thud as if something heavy had fallen. I screamed, "Frank, Frank." The driver was so startled that sparks nearly flew from the pedals. Even when we reached the building, he didn't leave. He ran up the stairs with me. The moment I opened the door, I saw Frank curled up on the floor, pale-faced and drenched in sweat. His muscles so stiff I couldn't even move him. I shouted his name loudly, trying to keep him conscious, but to no avail. Seeing him like that, my hands trembled so much I could barely call for an ambulance. Thankfully, the driver was kind-hearted. He took the initiative to help, and using his car, we rushed Frank to the hospital. I sat in the hospital waiting room all night, my limbs icy and trembling uncontrollably. My mind was haunted by visions of never seeing Frank again. I realized I couldn't accept it. It wasn't until the doctor came over and told me he was all right that I felt my spirit return to me. When I entered the treatment room, Frank was awake. The nurses were conducting various checks on him. Tears welled up as I looked at him, but I held them back. "Frank, don't scare me like this next time, okay?" He smiled weakly and patted the bed, signaling me to come closer. Just then, the doctor burst in. "President Frank, your latest pathology report is out. That stomach cancer diagnosis from before, we've confirmed it was a misdiagnosis." Those few sentences were overwhelming. I was stunned for several seconds. "Really?" Frank spoke, his voice hoarse. He looked at me, and my joy was evident, not just because of the misdiagnosis, but also because of the flicker of light I saw in his eyes when he looked at me. But then I quickly wondered, then why did he have such severe anorexia before? The doctor looked surprised. "You didn't know. President Frank has a severe stomach condition partly due to this, and also due to severe depression. This severe episode was caused by both the stomach issue and depression." Depression? I turned to look at Frank. He seemed a bit guilty and avoided my gaze. Looking down, just as I was about to ask something, a noisy commotion erupted outside. A well-dressed woman burst in, several nurses unable to stop her. The doctor moved to intervene, but she aggressively pushed him aside. Frank watched the scene unfold, his lips tremulously moving. After struggling for a long while, he finally managed to utter a word, "Mom." Before the word fully left his lips, a sharp slap landed crisply on his face, but Frank seemed unfazed by the pain, sitting dazedly on the hospital bed. "Don't call me Mom. I don't acknowledge a useless son like you. Frank, I'm giving you 3 days. Go back to work at ST Corporation, or our family will disown you forever." Frank remained silent. It was the doctor who couldn't stand it any longer. He stepped in front of Frank and addressed Mrs. Fiona. "Mrs. Fiona, President Frank is seriously ill. His severe gastric illness and depression have already threatened his life. Our medical institution has diagnosed him and advised against continuing work at the corporation. I understand he has already submitted his resignation to you. Why are you still pushing him to a dead end?" Frank's mother let out a cold laugh, snatching the medical report handed by the doctor and barely glancing at it. Her laugh grew more scornful as she dismissed it with a single word, "Pretense." She raised her hand and flung all the medical reports in Frank's face. Then, turning to the doctors, she exclaimed, "What a show you've all put on together. You've really gotten into the act over this period. Frank, aren't you still alive? If you wanted to die, shouldn't you have died already? If you want to die, then go ahead and die. Stop gathering all these people here and putting on this act. It's really an eyesore." With that, she left without looking back. Throughout it all, Frank didn't say a word. Even as he watched her leave, there was no reaction. But I distinctly saw a flicker of light in Frank's eyes just after Mrs. Fiona uttered those harsh words, which then extinguished once more. His eyes, now just ashes, reflected utter desolation. Frank remained frozen in the position he had been struck, motionless. The oppressive atmosphere in the treatment room seemed to solidify the air itself. No one dared to move. At last, it was Frank who broke the deadlock with a light chuckle. He looked at the surrounding medical staff and said softly with a gentle laugh, "It's nothing serious. Go on with your duties." People started moving around, the rustling of busy footsteps as if nothing had happened. Frank attempted to get out of bed. "I'd like to rest back in my room," he said. The doctor nodded and hurried to help him out of bed. However, perhaps due to weakness, Frank stumbled and knocked over a nearby medical tray. The nurses rushed to tidy up, while Frank repeatedly apologized. The doctor, meanwhile, tried to smooth things over, then led Frank towards his room. Amidst the chaos, I felt like an observer. I wanted to approach him, but I could faintly sense an aura of resistance around him, pushing me away. As he was about to leave the room, he finally turned his head and said softly, "Mia, I'm leaving tomorrow. I won't be coming back. Don't bother making that tomato and egg noodle dish anymore. You won't need to prepare it ever again." Perhaps it was intuition or instinct, but I felt something off about Frank today. Having lived together for so long, I had never felt this way before. Recalling Frank's actions, I tried to pinpoint any discrepancies in my memory. Vaguely, I remembered something I had overlooked. When Frank knocked things over, he seemed to casually hide something behind his back, as if he didn't want it to be noticed. My heart raced as I realized what he had hidden might be a scalpel. Turning back, I ran frantically along the hospital corridors to Frank's private room, pounding on the door desperately. A nurse tried to stop me, but I couldn't hear anything she said. Twisting the locked doorknob, I screamed, "Frank, Frank, open the door, don't scare me, don't do anything foolish." The nurse was also frightened by my shouting. The fact the door was locked probably confirmed my suspicions. Inside, there was no response, which seemed to prove everything. In desperation, I rushed to the nurse's station, grabbed a chair, and smashed it against the door of the room. The door opened. Frank was sitting with his back to the door, the stolen scalpel already placed against his neck. A small cut was slowly oozing blood, staining his collar as it spread. I rushed over and snatched the knife from his hands. "Have you lost your mind, Frank? What are you thinking?" Unlike his usual self, Frank's movements were eerily slow today. He looked up, his eyes lifeless, resembling black holes ready to absorb any light. I had never seen Frank like this before. It frightened me, softening my voice to a plea I scarcely recognized. "Frank, didn't you promise to help me start my business? Look, I haven't made it yet. How can you leave now?" Frank's Adam's apple bobbed as he spoke slowly and softly after a long pause, his voice raspy from suppression. "Mia, you will succeed." He avoided my gaze, looking down as he whispered, "I have some assets in my name. I've already had a will drawn up some time ago. Those assets will go to you. Use that money to run the company well." He paused. "Mia, you will succeed. I believe in you." "No," I interrupted. "I don't believe in myself. Frank, I'm not ready. I don't know how to handle anything about the company anymore. You need to teach me." "That was your promise." I was frantic, my words tumbling out incoherently. But he remained unresponsive. I grasped his hand, desperately trying to find reasons for him to keep living. Just consider it for, I wanted to say, for me, but I couldn't. What was I to him? What did I mean in Frank's heart? I didn't know. After all, our connection was just a fleeting encounter on a cliff. Maybe I wasn't the reason for him to stay in this world, so I took a detour. Just consider it for the company. Finally, Frank looked up at me, his eyes, however, still devoid of any light. He sighed lightly. "Mia, why bother?" Like he couldn't bear the pressure any longer. Frank's head drooped low. I supported him, letting him lean on my shoulder. His voice, like a kite string snapping, drifted away from me. "Mia, please let me go." In the following days, Frank became exceedingly sleepy. The doctor wasn't optimistic about his condition. He couldn't eat anything, relying only on nutritional fluids to sustain his life. I was saddened and felt helpless. During breaks from work, I would bring him a bowl of tomato and egg noodles, garnished with finely chopped green onions, but he wouldn't even touch it. The noodles would go from hot to cold, and cold to frozen, trying to stimulate his appetite. I constantly tried to make different foods for him and even brought him a beautifully crafted chocolate cupcake every day, but unfortunately, he showed no interest. No matter what I do, Frank seems to have no reaction. He has stopped speaking and just sits quietly each day, watching the small cake of today being replaced by the small cake of tomorrow. It's as if his time has frozen. During this period, I began to delve into Frank's past, trying to understand him completely. I heard that he was the youngest CEO of ST Group. After joining, it took him only 3 years to turn the massive losses of ST Group into profits, aggressively expanding into many industries. He was universally praised in the industry as a prodigy. Certainly not the useless person Mrs. Fiona described. Thinking about Mrs. Fiona's inexplicable resentment and control over Frank that day, it wasn't hard to imagine how repressed and suffocating Frank's days must have been. Just a brief moment was enough to leave everyone breathless. Frank endured such days for over 20 years, bearing that inexplicable hatred alone. A child's love for their parents is always pure, but a parent's hatred for their child never needs a reason. As I lift my head from the glorious chapters of Frank's past, it's hard to reconcile his impressive resume with the man he is at this moment. Frank sat by the bed, silently staring at a point, as if lost in a chaotic fog that filled the air around him. It was a boundless chaos, and he was alone in it, unable to feel the outside world. And the outside couldn't feel him either. I tried to finish my work early every day, squeezing in time to visit and take care of him, to feed him his medicine, but he wasn't cooperative. Each time, he would just glance and then turn his head away. I felt powerless. like watching someone slowly sinking into a swamp, unable to pull him out despite all my efforts. It was hard to imagine that this person, once capable of strategizing from afar, frail yet brilliant, had changed so drastically. Finally, I couldn't hold back my tears as I held a small cake. Standing in front of Frank, I whispered, "Frank, please, just a bite, even just one bite for me, do it for me, okay, I really need you." My head bowed, tears trickled down. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Frank, who had been unresponsive, mechanically and stiffly raise his hand towards me, touching the top of my head gently. After this response, Frank began to show signs of improvement. Sometimes I talked to him about work. Severe depression had limited his speech and mobility, so he spoke very little. Most of the time, he just listened attentively, often watching me with a slight, unconscious smile. Time flew by, and the doctor eventually allowed me to take him outside. As the seasons changed from spring and summer to autumn and winter, I stood on tiptoes, put a carefully chosen scarf around his neck, and we walked out of the stark white confines of the hospital. Mrs. Fiona did come looking for him after that, but I turned her away and even asked the doctor, familiar with Frank, to change his room to keep him away from his suffocating mother. Luckily, Mrs. Fiona wasn't a patient person and perhaps saw Frank as expendable. Eventually, she stopped coming. Frank had some peaceful days. After leaving the hospital, besides crowded places, we also visited serene, scenic spots. Although his movements and speech were still slow, he had improved significantly. Sitting on a park bench, I handed him a small chocolate cake. He smiled, a rare occurrence, and softly asked, "Why do you always bring me chocolate cakes?" Cradling his face in my hands, I earnestly replied, "Because chocolate makes people happy, and I want you to be happy forever." Frank half closed his eyes, seemingly soaking in the warmth of my palms before looking at me seriously and asking, "Do you like it?" I grimaced slightly. "Not really, I don't like things that are a bit bitter." "What do you like then?" I pondered, a question long forgotten. I let go of him and watched the children running around, trying to recall a childhood craving buried deep in my memory. Strawberry-flavored ice cream. As a child, I was very fond of eating ice cream, but my parents never bought it for me. They insisted that it was bad for my health and wouldn't allow even a single bite. Eventually, I saved up my breakfast money and secretly bought one, but before I could even taste it, I got caught. The ice cream was thrown away, and I ended up getting a severe scolding. They thought I was a naughty and irresponsible child. Feeling a bit down, I kicked at the stones on the ground. There was no reply from Frank, just silence spreading in the autumn breeze. The murmur of children's laughter shattered my gloom. I lifted my head as leaves fell around me and picked up my spirits. I told Frank to wait for me. "Stay here. I'll go buy us some amusement park tickets." I learned from Frank's doctor friend that all he had ever wanted during his childhood was a family trip to the amusement park. However, his strict parents never allowed it. As an adult, he found he no longer had a compelling reason to go. Frank, who had been indulging in a chocolate cupcake, looked up and smirked at my words, raising an eyebrow. "You really treat me like a kid, don't you?" I tilted my head, thought for a moment, and smiled. Aren't we all children in the eyes of the world? The line for tickets was long, and it took a while to get through, but when I turned around, Frank was nowhere to be seen. My heart skipped a beat, fearing that all his progress was just a charming deception, fearing he might be off to harm himself. I frantically called out his name among the crowd, terrified. In my panic, I heard his voice behind me, "Mia." There he stood, bathed in the autumn sun, looking as if edged with gold. He was holding 2 strawberry ice creams. He handed one to me. I didn't take it. I even started crying, purely out of fear. "Don't scare me like that. I'm really scared for you. It won't happen." His voice was soft as always, but now there was a firmness to it. "Really?" I asked. "You're not lying to me, really?" he said, placing the ice cream in my hand and holding it. "I wouldn't lie to you." A tear dropped onto the back of my hand. Looking up, I saw his eyes, moist and clear. Neither of us would speak of it, that single, glistening tear. Where had it fallen from? We had a blast at the amusement park that day, trying out almost every ride. I even used Frank's phone to take loads of photos of Frank and me laughing carelessly, making all the faces we weren't allowed to make as kids, carrying a bunch of childish toys, cheekily smearing ice cream on our faces, taking snapshots with cotton candy, and releasing quirky helium balloons. We celebrated a belated childhood and freedom in this wild manner. Until we were completely worn out, Frank and I lay sprawled on the grass afterward, gazing at the thinning stars not yet swallowed by the city lights. Immersed in a dark corner of the city, I said to Frank, "Leave your family. From now on, I'll take care of you." A light chuckle came from beside me. "Why does that sound like it's the other way around? Can't it be?" I sat up to meet Frank's beautiful eyes. "But then, I'd have nothing at all. Would you despise me?" I shook my head. "My company is just starting out, and it certainly doesn't match the riches of ST Group or your family. Would you despise me? I've never thought of such a thing." "Well, that settles it. Besides, to have ST Group's youngest CEO quit to work for me, what an honor that is. It'll be a highlight in our company's history." "What, to have poached the best CEO from ST Group without spending a penny?" Frank burst into laughter. That was the most hearty laugh I'd heard from him in a long time. A few days later, the resignation letter of ST Group's CEO was published in all the media. There were two letters, one that was initially sealed and one that was officially released now. ST Group's stock plummeted, press conferences followed one after another, seemingly endless. Frank's phone was eerily silent. That once bustling phone had been thrown off a cliff, lost forever. Meanwhile, Frank officially joined my company as the newly appointed CEO with a high salary. I, holding the decision-making and controlling stakes, returned to my beloved role in design, focusing on product development. Of course, this was just a title. In reality, Frank's decisions would still be discussed with me. He was like a railing on a pontoon bridge, steadying me as I sought the perfect balance between controlling the company and indulging in design. When Frank joined my company, he first presented me with two significant gifts. One was a financial audit report from his old company, revealing that the accounting issues leading to the company's brink of bankruptcy were orchestrated by Chandler, the CFO, and Bella. This deceit ruined the company's reputation. My hard work had been in vain, but luckily, Frank now had all the evidence in his hands. On the day the lawsuit was filed, Chandler called me. "Mia, listen to me, I still love you, we don't have to go this far." He was cut off mid-sentence as Bella grabbed the phone. "Mia, we've been best friends for so many years. There's nothing we can't talk about properly, you just want the money back. Right, will 10,000 be enough, or 20,000? "Bella," I interrupted her. "Thank you." Bella paused on the other end. "I've always remembered you as my best friend. Honestly, if you hadn't bravely infiltrated the enemy to show me Chandler was a jerk, I'd probably still be fooled by him. What you did for me, I'm truly, truly touched." "Thank you, Bella, you really are my best friend. I'll never forget this." "By the way, Chandler doesn't know about you tricking him, right, Bella? You cheap bastard." Chandler's voice suddenly erupted in fury over the phone. "So you've been deceiving me all along, you wretch?" Then, the sound of beating could be heard. Without needing to see, I knew a fierce dog-eat-dog drama had begun. I wiped away the non-existent tears from the corners of my eyes and packed away my Oscar-worthy acting, ready to hang up. Chandler, having beaten Bella half to death, lunged back to the phone. Mia, it was this vile woman stirring trouble between us. That money was actually me saving it for you." I was just about to. Before I could respond, the phone lightened in my hand. Frank had snatched it away. His voice, gentle yet indifferent, carried a mocking sneer. "Save it, Mia doesn't like to hear dogs barking." Curses erupted from the other end, but Frank ignored them. He glanced at his watch. After a moment, he casually intervened. "Stop swearing. Use this spare time to prepare how you'll explain your crimes to the police." As his words ended, the sound of police sirens began on the other end. Frank raised an eyebrow, as if everything was going as he expected. Then, he nonchalantly tossed the phone over the cliff into the sea below, where it disappeared. I looked at him annoyed. "Hey, that was my phone." Frank froze, then quickly recovered with an awkward smile. "No worries, I'll buy you a new one." "With what? You know I pay your salary." He coughed awkwardly to mask his embarrassment. "Then I suppose I'll just have to make it up to you personally, if you want." I scoffed flirtatiously and turned away, chin up, walking off while leaving Frank to chase after me. "Just tell me if you want me to." "Not telling you." Another gift from Frank was a group of former employees and clients from ST Corporation. In his words, after so many years at ST, It would be pathetic if he didn't have his own team, with their help. My company developed rapidly and soon became one of the top in the industry. On the day we closed a massive deal, Frank and I skipped the noisy celebration and found a quiet, secluded spot. Raising our glasses, I asked Frank, "We've known each other for so long, Frank, isn't there anything you want to tell me?" He paused for a moment, then suddenly smiled, a hint of bitterness fleeting across his lips. "Yes, but Mia, you know, I have nothing right now, even if I wanted to say something. It wouldn't be the right time." My anticipation shattered at that moment, leaving me slightly saddened because I liked him, a feeling that had started I don't remember when, but I knew I liked him, and so I hoped he might feel the same about me, but clearly, he had never said such things. Maybe I was just imagining things, or perhaps, I sighed in disappointment, raised my glass to Frank, and drank it all. That night we tacitly said nothing more, just stood under the night sky, drinking and watching the stars. I had asked the doctor, although Frank's condition had improved a lot, his illness limited his ability to express himself. Still, Frank taught me that if the mainstream market doesn't work, maybe we could try a different path. Coincidentally, he also invited me, and we ended up meeting at an amusement park. Unfortunately, it rained that day, but we still chose to keep our appointment. We walked the path we once walked, keeping to a mutual silence. The umbrella tilted towards me, the rain soaked through his side until we reached the front of a cake shop. I said to Frank, "Frank, I'm hungry, I'd like to get something to eat." He nodded in agreement and mentioned he also planned to buy something. Going our separate ways was something I was looking forward to. Upon entering the cake shop, I picked out a beautiful little chocolate cake. Before the clerk could package it, I pulled a ring box from my pocket, took out the exquisite men's ring hidden inside, and slipped it into the cake. If Frank couldn't take that step, why couldn't I be the one to do it? Emerging from the cake shop, Frank was already waiting under the eaves with a strawberry ice cream in hand. I gestured to him eagerly, urging him to eat it quickly. His eyes curved into crescents, urging me to hurry up and finish my strawberry ice cream too. Watching him carefully unwrap it, my heart suddenly started pounding chaotically. It was my first time doing something like this, and I felt very shy. I turned away, not daring to look at him, just shyly licking my ice cream to cover up my nervousness. Suddenly, my lips and teeth struck something hard. I was astonished, and it wasn't until I spat out an exquisite ring that I turned around to see Frank holding a ring as well. "Frank, Mia," we spoke at the same time. A tear glistened in Frank's eye. "Mia, give me a chance to speak." "Okay," I agreed. His trembling hands fetched a prepared box of matching rings from his pocket. Mustering all his courage, I knew this was the first step out of the chaos. He pushed the ring box forward and knelt on one knee. "I have a proposal concerning the rest of our lives. Miss Mia, would you be willing to explore it with me?" I pushed my ring box towards him too, then said, "Yes," after hearing the story above. What are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.